The building had a way of swallowing noise at night. The concierge gave a small nod as I crossed the marble, the kind that acknowledges familiarity without starting a conversation. The elevator arrived with a mild, civilized chime and we rose through a stack of sleeping floors. The cable's low murmur traveling through my shoes. At 9:42 p.m., the doors parted onto a hallway that smelled faintly of laundry steam and lemon. The carpet took my footsteps whole. Somewhere down the corridor, a security camera blinked its green patience. Clara was waiting at the end, a clipped silhouette against the pale door. The badge on her lanyard tapped once against the reader and the lock answered with an obedient click. "We'll keep it short," she said, a promise to the night more than to me. Warm light came on in a widening circle. The apartment inhaled us. She moved through the entry with the ease of someone who had taught 100 rooms how to behave. Clipboard tucked in the crook of her arm, pen riding the spiral. She handed me a set of keys that chimed against each other like a small, practical wind chime. "Final walkthrough," she said, and it landed in my chest like an instruction and a metaphor at the same time. We started at the kitchen, faucets first. Then the cold calculation of the dishwasher's test cycle. The tap stuttered and steadied. I held my hand under the stream until it turned honest hot. The garbage disposal cleared its throat and settled into a workman's rumble. She noted something in shorthand that I couldn't read and I found myself wanting to. "The way you want to read weather before you step outside." Clara wore the kind of black that doesn't need to announce itself. Not a suit tonight, but still executive, soft blouse, clean lines, a watch that measured more than time. She had the practiced calm of someone who could persuade a seller to give up a point and make them grateful for the lesson. My friend's mother first. Yes, that fence had governed years of small talk and holiday dishes, but also undeniably Clara. A person whose authority didn't crowd the room, it calibrated it. We moved to the living room. I toggled the switches, let the dimmers learn my preference. The HVAC woke into a low, even breath. She stood by the smoke detector, head tilted, listening for a test tone that never lies. Night pressed its face to the glass. The city below looked obedient from here. Lanes braided into a quiet promise. On the balcony, the wind found the railing and made a thin metallic vowel. "You've been sleeping?" she asked. An inventory question that didn't care about the checklist. "Enough to pass," I said, trying on a smile that I hoped didn't qualify as boyish. New client, liking the work, still learning where the edges are. "Edges are kinder when you name them," she said, not looking up from the detector. Pen hovering, a faint, dutiful chirp rewarded her patience. She tapped the test button once more, as if confirming the honesty of the first answer. In the bedroom, the carpet changed its texture and the room changed its obligations. I pulled the blackout shade and watched the city become rumor. We tested outlets in a grid and the lamp on the nightstand made a small throat sound before committing to light. She spoke without turning. "Does being alone make the place quiet?" she asked. "Or empty?" The answer took its time. The way some answers do when they're rearranging themselves into something you won't regret saying later. "Both," I said. "Quiet first, empty if I've been careless with the day." "Care is a thermostat," she said, and there was the smallest smile in the way she said it. Not at me but at the sentence. A note on the clipboard. A check next to GFCI. Back in the hall, we paused by a linen closet that smelled like drywall and newness. I watched her write, the steadiness of the line, the way her wrist anchored the page. I wanted to be read with that same economy, no extra adjectives. No stray exclamation marks. That was new. Wanting to be seen had always embarrassed me. Tonight it presented as a sensible wish. We did the window latches next. A sequence that felt like learning a person's moods. One was perfect, one stubborn, one willing if you asked correctly. Clara tested each with patient pressure. Listening more than forcing. "Buildings," she said, "have opinions. So do people," I said, and felt the sentence extend past the latch into the air between us. She glanced over, the look quick and untheatrical, a calibration more than a stare. In her face at rest there was less armor than in the daylight version of her, No performance for colleagues and clients. Just the discipline that remains when you're not being watched. 44 had suited her the way some years do when people wear them on purpose. The lines around her eyes looked like signatures she'd decided to keep. On the balcony again, I checked the rail bolts by habit and she checked the sightlines like someone who sells views for a living. The night had a faint iron smell. A train downriver announced itself in a single, patient horn. The city made that sound it makes when it believes it's off duty. Independence, she said, neither a question nor a conclusion, looks different when the door closes. I want a place that doesn't argue with me, I said, not a silence that punishes. A quiet that agrees. She nodded, a small verdict in profile. Then you'll have to agree with it back. We returned to the living room to finish the list. She crossed off balcony drain and wrote, OK after Ryan in exacting lowercase. I flipped light switches that remembered the dim they'd been assigned. We stood at opposite ends of the room and it felt collegial. Not distant. The apartment had complied with our demands and now waited to see if we knew what to do with our victory. Final walkthroughs are really just another way of asking, she said. Cap snapped onto the pen with a quiet click. What stays, what goes, and what will demand a conversation later. She said it to the list. But the sentence ran a wire between us all the same. I thought of the last months, my deliberate saving. The way I'd been collecting proofs that I could be trusted with my own square footage. I thought about how most of my wanting had been about being seen as finished when what I actually craved was the right to still be in progress without being mistaken for incomplete. The last item was window seals. She walked to the big pane and set her palm flat on the mullion. I joined her. A respectful foot away. From here, the city's light was a collage, offices obeying their cleaning crews. Kitchens telling on late dinners. A tiny constellation where a rooftop party pretended it was summer. The glass held the temperature of the building's heart. She turned her head then, not quite toward me, not quite away, and let the moment sit long enough to collect meaning if it wanted. Have you been sleeping? Had been a professional kindness earlier. Now her voice carried something else, an attention that knew the difference between competence and cost. I held the view the way you hold a question you can't answer without altering it. Sometimes, I said, better when the work makes sense. Better when I'm not trying to prove I'm ready. Her reflection looked at mine in the glass. Two faces half superimposed on a map of small, honest lights. She studied it as if studying a painting. Patient with silence. Distrustful of easy resolutions. When she finally spoke, it came out like a line she'd tried in her head and chosen for its exactness. Lights look different at this hour, she said, honest. We began again in the kitchen as if the room were a checklist written in metal and glass. Clara set the induction hob to a low simmer and the surface answered with a restrained hum. Heat appearing without drama. She pulled the dishwasher rack in and out to feel the glide. Pressed the start buttons in sequence until the familiar cascade, pump, fill, a shy churn, settled into its cycle. Steam ghosted the edge of the stainless and vanished like a thought you decide not to finish. After the divorce, she said, eyes on the control panel. I kept the habit of cooking for two. It took months to retrain the hand that measures. She tapped a spoon against the sink. Not for the sound but to mark the sentence. A fully equipped kitchen can still be missing a person. I let the faucet run until the water turned decisive. Then shut it with the kind of precision you use when you want to prove you can be trusted with small things. The garbage disposal growled obligingly and went quiet. I've been teaching myself one dish at a time, I said. Omelets that don't apologize. Pasta that doesn't cling to itself for comfort. It was a joke and not. She heard both versions and allowed him to stand. We moved to the bedroom where light softened and obligations changed shape. I tugged the blackout shade. The city receded to rumor. Outlets were tested in a quiet grid, lamp, phone charger, the practical choreography of future nights. The carpet gave underfoot in a way that suggests money spent on silence. Clara checked the closet tracks. Slid the door until resistance announced itself and then corrected it with two patient turns of a tiny screwdriver she produced from a pocket I would have sworn held nothing. "Responsibility looks good on you," she said without flattery, like a note on a file. "It feels heavy in the wrong places sometimes," I answered, surprised at how quickly the truth volunteered. "I hit the marks: work, bills, gym, but some days I realize I haven't had a single thought that wasn't about being acceptable. It's adult. Technically, it's also tight, not much air." She didn't rush to comfort or revise. She tested another outlet and the plug answered with a clean, satisfying bite. "Rooms can be airless when they're perfectly sealed," she said. "That's not a flaw. It's a setting. You adjust it." Back in the hall, the HVAC whispered on, the building exhaling in a steady key. We paused at the linen closet and she made a note in a handwriting that looks like the voice she uses on bad news: clear, unembellished, survivable. The pen clicked closed with a small, precise sound, the kind of punctuation that prevents conversations from wandering. On the balcony the night found us again. Wind threaded the railing and turned the city into a low chorus, distant traffic. A train declaring its geometry somewhere downriver. The breadth of trees you never notice in daylight. From this height lights spread into systems, red pools at intersections. A white ribbon crossing the bridge. A field of windows negotiating their own small stories. Clara leaned a forearm on the rail in a posture that denied nothing and performed nothing. "If the way ahead is blocked?" she asked, as if the city were a diagram we could annotate. "What do you do?" "I don't ask the door to be a wall I can win against," I said. I slowed down enough to see the exits I missed when I was trying to be efficient. If there aren't any, I turn and call it strategy instead of failure. The difference is mostly naming. She considered that with a small, unshowy nod. "When pressure builds," she said, "do you accelerate to clear it or brake to absorb it?" "Neither," I said, hearing the answer arrive before I could weigh it. "I make space, change lanes, let time gather a little. Pressure isn't the same as pace." The wind pressed a cool palm to the back of my neck and then let go. She watched my hands as I spoke, a detail I registered without deciding what it meant. Next to us, a neighbor's balcony held two neglected chairs pointed at a view no one had had time to share. I almost pointed them out and didn't. Some metaphors don't need an audience. "Overqualified for loneliness," she said suddenly, the humor dry, the self-knowledge kinder than the line deserved. I laughed because I recognized the diploma. "Same program," I said. The laughter arrived small and clean. Not the kind that tries to exercise feeling but the kind that makes room for it to sit without misbehaving. Silence followed, the honest kind that comes after a laugh that didn't have to drag apology behind it. The HVAC's even breath re-entered the soundscape. A bassline you only hear when you stop needing melodies. Down in the park a single dog announced something only dogs understand and then lost interest. We stood close enough that the ambient light from the room behind us found our faces and built a layered reflection in the glass door, two outlines. The city's constellations stitched through us like careful thread. "People treat final walkthroughs like a hunt for flaws," she said after a while, still looking at the grid of windows across the way. "Sometimes they're an inventory of capacity. What a thing can hold without breaking. What two people can hold without lying to themselves." I kept my hands on the rail because the railing was honest. "I keep waiting for someone to certify that I've become a grown man," I said. "I don't think that inspector is coming. I think I have to write the certificate and then live like I didn't forge it." She turned her head just enough that in the reflection our eyes met. The look wasn't a spark. It was an alignment. The way lenses click into the right focus with no drama at all. The city's light climbed the planes of her face and softened them without erasing what they'd learned. We didn't step closer. We didn't retreat. The not moving felt less like caution and more like an agreed standard. We would not make the moment say more than it had earned yet. And we would not ask it to say less. Behind us, the apartment continued to behave. Dishwasher counting its beats. A lamp remembering its dim. A room that had been measured and found sound. Out here, with the railing cool under our fingers and the wind reusing its sentences. The inventory went on. Not square footage, not fixtures. The tally of two people who could name their edges without pretending not to have them. Who could stand in the same weather and keep their balance without needing to hold on? Ready for the rest? She asked finally. Meaning the list and not only the list. I am, I said, and was. The answer felt like an adjustment to the thermostat, air moving again. Not rushing. We went back inside without closing the door all the way, letting a measure of night follow us in so the rooms would remember there was a world beyond them. The dishwasher whispered on, the pen uncapped. The work continued, smaller now but truer, like breathing you notice because you finally have the air to pay attention. The living room accepted a quieter version of itself when Clara reached for the dimmer and drew the light down until edges softened and colors admitted they were warmer than they had pretended to be. The clipboard lay in her hand like a shield that had completed its work. She set it on the coffee table so gently the sound became an instruction. We're not here to startle anything. For a while we let the room breathe for us. The dishwasher counted in the distance. The balcony door, left a palm's width ajar, let the night lean in with its measured cool. We were standing on opposite sides of a rug whose pattern looked like an argument resolved. The checklist, with its small boxes and obedient lines, waited where she'd left it, suddenly too literal for what the evening had become. I invited you because I trust your calm, she said. The sentence was soft but unhedged. The way trained voices speak when they've decided clarity is the only luxury worth paying for. Not your charm, not your hunger, your calm. I took the words in as if they belonged to a responsibility rather than a compliment. I thought this was about the apartment, I said, and felt the truth make more room inside me as I spoke it. It wasn't, not only. She nodded once, as if we had both passed the first question on an exam with only 2 possible answers. Her gaze didn't perform intimacy. It held it steady while it checked for weak spots. I watched her hands rest open at her sides. The posture of a person who has nothing to sell and something to keep. We can talk around it or we can talk it, she said, looking not at me but at the dimmed lamp as though the room could overhear and keep a secret. I've been thinking about you more than I should. Not in the lazy way of fantasy. In the way that respects consequences before you court them. I know, I said, the admission arriving with relief rather than triumph. I've been thinking about you too. It started as admiration for how you move through rooms. It changed into wanting to be the kind of man you could meet there without either of us pretending. We let that sit where it fell. And the night didn't object. I could feel the temptations lining up, the easy jokes, the borrowed bravado, the dramatic confession that turns feeling into applause. We refused them in favor of something that would stand up in daylight. There are things we won't do, Clara said, and the steadiness in her tone made the room smaller and kinder at once. Jason matters. My work matters. Your independence matters. I won't let a private truth make a public mess. If we explore this, we do it without asking anyone else to carry the cost. Agreed, I said. No favors on leases, no blurred paperwork, no using the apartment as a pretext for attention. If we're together, it's because we're choosing it in sentences plain enough to say to ourselves. I surprised myself with how quickly the rules arrived. Perhaps I had been writing them in the background all along. Her eyes warmed a degree at sentences. The way people who live by contracts relax when terms appear. And nothing happens because a night made the city look forgiving. She added, we don't let lighting decide character. I glanced at the clipboard on the table. It looked suddenly emblematic. The page of measurements and checkmarks. The tidy columns that had given us something to do with our hands until our mouths were ready to keep up. I put my fingers to the cardboard edge. Not to pick it up, but to place my palm flat on it as if to sign out the equipment. She mirrored the gesture from the other side, her hand a few inches from mine. Paper, then air, then skin, 3 layers of consent. This is the part, she said, voice even, where final walkthroughs do their real work. We decide what stays, what goes, and what we keep to ourselves. The pause around the last clause was not coyness, it was care. She was lifting the sentence with 2 hands so it wouldn't tear. We practiced stillness the way careful people do when they're auditioning trust. No leaning, no reaching, just the calibration of breath to breath. The discovery that air can be shared without being stolen. Up close, without crossing the line we both saw. I could read the smaller truths on her face, fatigue she wore without apology, a brightness that wasn't show. Only voltage, the fine, unarguable signatures of years she had chosen instead of resisted. She smelled like citrus taught not to shout. I don't want secrecy because I'm ashamed, she said. I want privacy because I know what we're risking and I would rather not let strangers hold the pen. Then we keep the pen, I said, and we write small at first. Silence returned, this time with texture, the hiss of the HVAC, the dishwasher's steady claws, the city murmuring punctuation through the open door. I let my thumb move a fraction on the clipboard's edge, a motion so small it could be mistaken for a fidget by anyone not paying exquisite attention. Her fingers answered with an equally precise reply, a single tap that meant yes. I felt you. We closed the distance by degrees that wouldn't register on a ruler. The rug's pattern gave us a point to stand on. Our shoulders found a parallel. Our reflections in the window fused and separated with each matched breath like a slow lesson in alignment. I wanted to reach for her and didn't, not because I feared refusal, but because I respected the scale of the moment and the people we owed care to beyond it. There will be mornings, she said quietly, when this feels like courage and others when it feels like arithmetic. Both are fine. We do math as honestly as we do longing. I smiled because the math was a language I trusted. And when the numbers don't balance, we don't falsify the ledger, she said. We pay attention earlier. The answer landed with the sober mercy she keeps for decisions she intends to live with. We stood another few seconds inside the electricity we'd made by refusing to be careless. Then, with the same deliberation she'd used setting down the clipboard, Clara took her hand back first. Not a retreat, an agreement to stop exactly where the yes remained clean. I matched the gesture, palms leaving the cardboard together. The sound scarcely a sound at all. The room expanded to its normal size. Grateful, the lamp remembered its job. The air moved in the even way of buildings that have been seen to. We looked at each other long enough to prove we still could without turning looking into a demand. When the dishwasher clicked over into its next cycle, we both smiled, and the charged pause sealed itself like an envelope addressed but not yet sent. Clara slid the key fob into her pocket with the same precision she gives signatures and contracts. An action so small it chose its own silence. The clipboard followed, closed with a quiet, competent click, as if armor had decided to be a briefcase again. No one needs to know about tonight, she said, not a whisper, not an apology, an act of care stated in the grammar of a decision. Secrecy isn't shame, I answered, the words arriving with a steadiness I trusted. It's stewardship. The sentence felt like a level being set. The room sat a little truer on its studs. We stood across the coffee table as if negotiating terms neither of us intended to break. The dishwasher kept time in the kitchen. A ribbon of night slid through the balcony door and pulled at our ankles. She named the boundaries first. Not to shrink the space but to give it walls strong enough to hold us. We go slow. We don't borrow advantage from this. No favors on leases. No blurred documents. No calls that start with a pretext and end with a confession. We respect Jason. We don't let him discover what we should eventually tell him. But we will not speak a word until what we have can survive being heard. And work, she added. What I am for my clients stays untouched. If there is any hour you need me to be Clara the agent, I'm that. We don't spend capital we can't repay. Agreed, I said. The word felt contractual without feeling cold. And we meet when it doesn't bend anyone else's day into a shape it can't keep. No performances. No accidents engineered to look like fate. We rehearsed consent again in the smallest ways. A nod. A breath. The briefest glance that asked are we still aligned and found the answer where it had been all night. She moved toward the door. Flipped the lights up a single degree. Enough for the apartment to remember its showings. I followed, leaving the balcony open a palm's width so the place wouldn't think we'd taken all the air with us. In the hall we became the version of ourselves the building knows. Two people moving with the curated distance of good neighbors. The carpet received our steps. The camera above the elevator blinked its unblinking eye. The polite omniscience of public space. In the mirrored doors we were parallel lines. Close enough for geometry, far enough for propriety. "Text me when you're home," she said, the thing people say when the feeling is real and the performance budget is zero. "I will," I said. "You, too." We wrote down without talking. Floors counted themselves in low amber digits. Somewhere between 12 and 6. I felt the agreement settle across my shoulders like a well-fit coat, chosen. Held, not heavy. When the doors opened, the lobby had entered its off-duty self, one lamp in a corner doing more work than its wattage promised. The concierge arranging tomorrow's packages into the shape of intention. Clara paused a step behind me in a choreography that protected both of us. She lifted a hand just once, not a wave, not a call, simply the acknowledgement two pilots give when a landing has gone clean. Outside, the air kept its late-hour honesty. A taxi passed with its light on, making an offer to the street and receiving no answer. We separated the way strangers do, me toward the parking structure, she toward the dark calm of the curb, our trajectories measured to avoid orbiting too obviously. On the sidewalk, I felt the building watching, not with menace but with the lazy vigilance of a city that likes to believe it's seen everything. I let it see nothing in particular. By the time I reached my car, my phone vibrated once. "Home when you are." No punctuation. The kind of sentence built to be kept. I drove without music so the night could keep talking. The engine did its honest work. Traffic lights made small decisions for me and I agreed to every one. At home the lock turned with the newness of a promise. I sent the text and set the phone face down. Not to pretend distance, but to leave the room clear of rehearsals. Sleep came in clean lines. Days have their own gait when you don't rush them. The next morning gave me emails. A meeting that ended on time. An apple that snapped correctly under the tooth. I let the world be ordinary on purpose. As if steadiness were part of the care we'd pledged. In the quiet units between obligations, the memory of her hand near mine on the clipboard returned. Small and exact, like a notation in the margin of a page you don't want to overmark. It was 3 days later, weekday, mid-afternoon, that my phone hummed with the modest gravity I'd come to associate with her. Key pickup for another walkthrough. The phrase wore its disguise openly. A private joke written in the font of business. Time and place followed. The message did not ask. It invited. I read it once for logistics and again for meaning. Then typed the reply that matched its scale. Yes, a time that honored both our calendars. The send button became its own kind of signature. In the reflection of my dark monitor, I caught the outline of a man I recognized more than I had expected to, shoulders easy. Mouth at rest. A patience that didn't feel like waiting. Somewhere an HVAC vent exhaled the same steady sentence as the one in that high apartment. I stood and gathered my things. This time, I knew it was never